Joining me in the studio now is TalkTV's royal editor, Sarah Hewson. The first time a member of the royal family has been in the dock in court giving evidence for 130 years.
Yes, and it is quite an extraordinary spectacle, Vanessa, to see Prince Harry as a senior member of the British royal family appearing there in the witness box. Generally, he's been very measured and polite in his responses. He's appeared to look a little bit more relaxed throughout the afternoon, although the questioning has been getting a lot tougher on him. In the breaks, he's escorted by his security to a small room where he's not allowed to discuss his evidence with anyone, including his lawyers. He's been giving evidence since 10:30 this morning. So what are we? Coming up to 6 hours in, although he had an hour for lunch. And this is going to go on into tomorrow as well. But yes, truly remarkable to see Prince Harry there, the son of the King, being questioned in the Royal Courts of Justice.
I can't believe anybody could fail to feel sympathy for Harry and what he's been through and the loss of his mother at such an incredibly young age, and his interpretation that she was hounded by the press and that she was chased to her death by paparazzi in a Parisian tunnel. I mean, if you were growing up with that hanging over you, it would be most unlikely and most unusual, wouldn't it, that you would have a happy and kind of symbiotic relationship with the press. Obviously, that's not going to be how he feels. And I think we all get that. I think we all feel sympathy and understanding for that feeling that he has. But when you say Harry's been giving evidence, I wonder objectively how much you think he's been giving evidence and how much he's been effectively emoting, you know, saying what he feels and what he thinks and what he believes, which is not evidence, is it? And no court will ever listen to any of those perspectives or moods or points of view. It's not about your opinion or your feeling. It's about evidence. It's about proof. Can you show that there's been hacking? Can you show there's been unlawful obtaining of information? And you heard Ollie saying there, you know, he's talking about an incident where he didn't even have a phone yet. So whose phone could have been hacked? So, well, you know, is that what you're mainly getting? Somebody who obviously has suffered, but is determined to have their day to talk about their suffering rather than give evidence.
He claims that he feels a duty as a senior member of the royal family and as a former military man to do this on behalf of those who don't have the platform in which to do it. We know that this is his crusade against the media. He wants to change the media landscape. But you're actually absolutely right on the sympathy. And actually, that's been raised by Andrew Green, KC, the barrister representing the Mirror Group newspapers. And he said that, can I make it clear, Prince Harry, everybody, I'm sure, has enormous sympathy with the level of press intrusion you've experienced throughout your life. But it doesn't necessarily follow that this is the result of unlawful activity, and that's what I'm seeking to establish. And that is what has happened today. Going through every one of the 33 articles that are included in this case, Prince Harry claims there are 148 that he believes have evidence of unlawful activity, 33 of them being questioned today, and every single one of them is being gone through meticulously to try to get evidence from Prince Harry as to whether what shows that there was phone hacking or blagging of some description to get this information. And the word that Harry is using a lot is suspicious.
Yes.
He says it made me suspicious. But suspicion isn't good enough in a court of law. The burden of proof is on him, and he has got to show evidence that links those articles to unlawful activity. And so that is what the Mirror Group's barrister is trying to do today.
Just in case people can't quite imagine what this sort of thing feels like. Obviously, I've got some kind of insight into what this kind of... So say, just imagine that you are going to hospital to have an operation. And let's imagine that you tell, you know, your sister and your best friend and also the person who's going to pick up your children from school that day, because obviously you're not going to be there because you're going to be in hospital. And you know, obviously you then go to hospital and people might see you walking in. Somebody might see you in the waiting room. There are hospital staff, nurses, doctors, porters, people delivering things, they're volunteers. You might be seen, you might not, you might be. And then the next day or the day after, the news of this private hospital visit where you had an operation that you don't really think you told anybody about is front page of a newspaper. It is pretty difficult to prove, unless you've got evidence of it, or evidence has been found, how it got into the public domain. You know, was it your sister? Was your phone hacked? Did somebody go through your bins? Was it somebody who saw you walking into the hospital? Was it the car park attendant? You know, you never do know. I mean, you sometimes know because sometimes there's evidence. For example, you know, they can see the phone number being given to private detectives or some illegal means of. But sometimes it's very, very hard. And it looks as if Harry might have got kind of embroiled in this without really realising about the burden of proof in some instances.
And you can see the impact that paranoia has had on his whole life, because he talks about it changing the relationships with his mother, with his father, with his brother, Prince William, when he saw articles about them having a row about a meeting with Paul Burrell, for example. He said that sowed the seeds of mistrust with all of his friends. How it affected his relationship with Chelsy Davy, that she said, enough's enough, I can't do this anymore. That his circle around him shrunk so much because he didn't know who he could trust. Even his closest advisors like Mark Dyer and Tiggy Legbook, his former nanny, that he started to shut them out because he was no longer trusting them. And this theme of the paranoia, although he says that he's seen so many claims that his mother was paranoid, and he said she wasn't paranoid, she was fearful about what was actually happening, and I'm the same.
It's very, very difficult, isn't it? Because one has to feel the utmost sympathy for this fellow.
Yes.
But there has been a kind of perpetual victimhood in Spare, in interviews, in all the things that we've seen and heard, whether we've wanted to or not, which one doesn't want to see playing out in court, because that's not the place for that, is it?
Court is not a place to draw inference.
No.
And what it seems from the case we're seeing laid out before us today is that every time Harry sees an article in the papers about him, it has caused him great distress. And then he has tried to work out where that article has come from. But you need evidence for that, concrete evidence, not suspicion and inference. I mean, he talked about the voicemails disappearing, for example, on his phone. But you know, this is going back to 1996. We're going back over a long period of time. We've had extracts of Spare read out. He's talked about the benefit of hindsight and why some of the evidence doesn't match up. He was questioned as to whether he actually wrote the witness statement himself or whether his legal team put it together for him. He said, no, this is all of my words. Excuse me, this is how I feel. And we can see he feels very deeply and very passionately about this. Whether that is enough to convince a judge, we will have to see.
They say that his aim, or he says that his aim, is to make a permanent difference to the way the press conducts itself, the sorts of things that are written, the sorts of things that are published. What do you think he would like to bring about? Surely he doesn't intend to silence the whole British press. What does he want to do? What does he want to achieve that hasn't been achieved?
He wants full-scale media reform. He wants to change the relationships between the media and the royal household, and between the media and the government. You read at the beginning of the programme, Vanessa, that extremely powerful quote when he talked about the country being judged by the state of our press and our government, and both being at rock bottom. And he said, unfortunately, without proper press regulation, which the current government clearly have no appetite for because their friends in the press said so, it's only going to get worse. He wants full-scale press regulation and reform.
I think some people think that's already happened, that the press has been regulated.
Post-Leveson, but he argues it doesn't go far enough.
You know, if people remember what it used to be like, I think people will think that a great deal has been achieved if that's the direction that you want to go. And other people think it's the curbing of free speech. It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? But at the heart of it, there's a gentleman who's definitely been very badly damaged and is obviously suffering, still suffering.
Still very much
Obviously, there's
suffering,
also the issue of, you know, invading your own privacy by writing a book like Spare, talking about losing your virginity that nobody knew anything about, you know, talking about a fight with your brother that nobody knew anything about, talking about all sorts of stuff that nobody knew anything about.
And we've even learnt more details. Today, Vanessa, we've learnt about his punishment from his father after the articles about him wearing a Nazi uniform to a fancy dress party.
Punishment?
Well, he was grounded. He was made to get a job on the farm at Highgrove and to muck out pigsties. And he said in his witness statement that his father was extremely disappointed with the decisions that he had taken. And there are so many details.
But how is that the press's fault?
He claims because those details about his punishment, he's using this article, those details about his punishment ended up in an article. Oh. And how could people have known that unless there was unlawful information?
And you never know. You never know if somebody working on the farm, the person that handed him the rake, the person, you just don't, you know, somebody in the palace who heard the then Prince Charles shouting at him because he was so angry. You just don't know, do you? I mean, this is why it's very difficult, unless they've got evidence to prove it. We'll see.
Yeah, the other part of the case being put by Andrew Green, Casey, today surrounds about distress, and we can see that the articles calls them distress. He says even looking at them now, he still feels distress. But he's been asked repeatedly, did you know about these articles at the time? Did you read these articles at the time? And he says he can't remember and he doesn't know, and perhaps he didn't. So he's been asked, well, how can it have caused you distress if you didn't know about it at the time until you and your legal team went through it? Is it more that the distress was caused by the fact that these stories were out there and they were causing you general embarrassment? And we can feel sympathy for that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there was unlawful activity leading to that distress.
OK, we're going to rejoin this later on in the programme. Sarah Hewson, thank you very much indeed.